Once upon a whisper in the winds of the ancient world, in a place where the days never quite began and the nights never fully ended, there existed a hill. It was not an ordinary hill. It was known only in dreams, visited by children in slumber and by poets who wandered too far into silence. They called it the Hill of Time. The hill was wrapped in layers of mist that curled like breath in winter air. From its base to its peak, time did not behave as it should. Here, a moment might last 1,000 years, or an hour might vanish like a sigh. And at the very top, inside a grove of silver-barked trees, sat an old man with eyes the color of dawn and dusk entwined. His name was Kronos. Kronos was the keeper of moments, the weaver of hours, and the guardian of forgotten tomorrows. He sat cross-legged on a cushion of moss older than the moon, and before him lay a loom not of this world. It shimmered faintly, threaded with strands of gold, silver, ash gray, and midnight blue, the threads of time itself. He wove gently, patiently, never in haste. His hands, though ancient, moved with the grace of falling petals. Each thread he added told a story: the smile of a mother, the first step of a child, the quiet death of a star, the lingering look between old lovers, the blooming of a rose no one would ever see. These moments flowed into one another, endless and eternal, and Kronos never missed a beat. Far below the hill, in the world where time moved in straight lines and clocks ticked with certainty, there lived a little girl named Leora. She was 7, or perhaps 9. She herself wasn't quite sure anymore. Her days felt too short, her nights too long. Time slipped through her fingers like sand, and she often sat on her windowsill, staring at the stars, wondering why the good moments always ran away so quickly and the sad ones stayed like shadows in her room. One night, as rain pattered gently on the roof and her candle flickered low, Leora felt an ache in her chest, a longing, soft and deep, like the hush before snowfall. She closed her eyes, and in the rhythm of the rain and her slowing breath, she drifted beyond dreams, beyond sleep, and into the land of the Hill of Time. When she opened her eyes, she was standing at the base of the hill, barefoot on dew-damp grass. The mist curled around her ankles like shy cats. The air smelled of lavender, old pages, and something she could not name, something like memory. There was no path, but her feet knew where to go. Up she walked, past stones carved with symbols that shifted when she blinked, past pools of still water where stars swam lazily beneath the surface, past trees that whispered her name with every rustle. It took no time at all, or perhaps it took forever. When she reached the top, she saw him, the old man with the loom. He did not look surprised to see her. He smiled, a smile that reached into her bones and made her feel safe. "Hello, Leora," he said, as if they had spoken 1,000 times before. "Are you time?" she asked. "I am one who listens to it," he replied. Leora stepped closer to the loom, mesmerized by the threads that glowed and shimmered with stories. She could almost hear laughter echoing in distant gardens. Lullabies hummed in rocking chairs, the sound of wind rustling pages of unwritten journals. She reached out a hand but stopped just short of touching the loom. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Kronos nodded, his gaze never leaving the slow, deliberate motion of his weaving. "It is not finished. It never is." "What are you making?" she asked, tilting her head. He looked at her for a moment, as if measuring her question by the weight of her heart. "I'm weaving time itself, all that was, all that is, and all that may never be." "That sounds lonely," she said without thinking. Kronos paused. "It is quiet, but in quiet things grow." Leora sat down cross-legged across from him, mirroring his posture. She studied the threads. Some were bright and pulsing, others dim and fragile. One shimmered violet and wept music. Another curled like smoke and carried the scent of oranges and firewood. "Do you weave everyone's time?" she asked. "I guide it," he answered. "But time lives differently in every soul. Some stretch it like canvas, others crumple it like paper. Leora looked down. I think I lose mine a lot. The good times go too fast, and the bad ones stay too long. Kronos nodded slowly. You are not the only one. But that's only because you think time is a straight line. It is not. She looked at him, puzzled. Time, he said, reaching out and gently tugging a silvery thread, is a circle, a spiral, a tide, a breath. It moves forward and backward and inward, all at once. Some memories take root in tomorrow. Some hopes live in yesterday, and dreams belong to the folds where time naps. Leora felt her head tilt with sleepiness just listening to him. His voice was like warm tea and soft quilts. She wrapped her arms around her knees. Can I stay here for a while? Kronos smiled. Time moves differently here. Stay as long as you need. So she did. And though she did not notice it, the mist grew softer around her. The silver-barked trees swayed gently above, their leaves falling without sound, each one vanishing before it hit the ground. Kronos continued weaving, and Leora watched him in silence. Each time his fingers moved, she felt something stir within her, a long-forgotten afternoon at the lake with her mother. The sound of a lullaby hummed by a grandfather who no longer remembered her name. A lost marble from childhood found in a coat pocket. The warmth of sun through a window on a day when she had cried too much. She felt it all again, not painfully, but gently like waves returning shells to the shore. Kronos looked at her then, eyes gleaming faintly. Would you like to try? Leora blinked, me weave. He nodded and shifted slightly, allowing her to sit beside the loom. I don't know how, she said, suddenly shy. Your heart remembers. She placed her small hands on the edge of the loom, and to her amazement, a strand of thread shimmered into existence, pale rose and honey gold, with flickers of green and blue. What is it? She asked. Kronos smiled. It's a moment waiting to be lived. Gently. Leora passed the thread through the loom. As she did, a soft humming filled the air. She closed her eyes and saw herself running barefoot through a field at dusk, chasing fireflies. She saw her father standing at the gate with his arms wide open. She saw a rainy afternoon where she read a book and sipped hot cocoa in total peace. When she opened her eyes, the thread had woven itself into the tapestry, glowing gently beside the others. You did well, Kronos said. I saw the future, she whispered. He nodded. Or a dream of it? And so the two sat in quiet companionship. Leora would try a few more threads, each one bringing with it a vision, or feeling some joyful, some bittersweet. Sometimes Kronos would explain what she saw. Other times, he said nothing at all. Some truths only bloom in silence. Leora did not know how long she stayed beside the loom, for in that place, clocks had no hands and the sun had no hurry. What she did know was that with every thread she wove, she felt lighter, not as if something was being taken away, but as if something long buried was being remembered, something soft, true, and quietly shimmering beneath the dust of hurried days. Kronos wove beside her without speaking, yet his silence was full of patience, of presence, of a knowing that did not need to be spoken aloud. Kronos, Leora said one day or night, for the light never quite changed. How do you know which thread belongs next? He did not look up from his work. I listen. To what? He lifted a silver-blue strand between his fingers, to the weight of the air, to the hush before a tear falls, to the laughter that echoes after joy has left. Time sings, Leora. Most are too busy to hear it, but you're starting to listen. She looked down at her hands. But I don't hear anything. Not with your ears, he said gently, with your remembering. Leora didn't fully understand, but she didn't need to. Some truths rest not in the mind, but in the slow opening of the heart. Later, as she sat watching the tapestry grow longer, She noticed a space in the threads, a dark, frayed patch where colors seemed to dim and warp. "What happened there?" she asked, pointing to it. Kronos's hands slowed. For the first time, his eyes did not shine. "That is a tangle," he said quietly. "Can it be fixed?" He shook his head. "Not everything broken is meant to be mended. Some moments remain frayed, so we remember how fragile they are." Leora was quiet for a while. Then she said, "There's a fray in me too." Kronos looked at her, not with pity, but with the deep compassion of a tree that had stood through countless winters. "Tell me." She hesitated, then whispered, "My mother went away. She said she'd come back soon. But time just kept going, and I keep waiting. But the days stretch and tangle and twist, and I'm scared that time forgot her, or me." The words fell like leaves. Kronos did not speak. Instead, he reached into the folds of the loom and pulled forth a thread delicate, almost invisible, but pulsing with quiet warmth. He handed it to her. "This is a waiting thread," he said. "Very few can weave it. It requires patience without bitterness, hope without anchors." Leora took it gently, and as she placed it into the loom, she felt something shift, not outside her, but inside. The thread shimmered as it joined the others, and though it did not undo the fray, it surrounded it in a soft glow, like lanterns hung around a sorrow. Kronos smiled faintly. "That is how we carry time's weight, not by erasing what hurts, but by weaving around it with light." And for the first time in a long while, Leora felt something ease. Not joy, not quite calm, but a soft loosening, as though the knot in her chest had sighed. She looked up at Kronos. "Will I remember this when I wake up?" He didn't answer directly. Some memories choose to stay. Others become stars that guide you even if you forget their names. Leora looked to the tapestry again. The section she had helped weave glowed gently, a garden of moments she did not yet live. A record of hope in a language made of color and light. Then, far below the hill, a wind stirred. It was a wind from the world of ticking clocks and fading calendars. Leora felt it brush against her cheek, a reminder that the waking world was calling her name. "Is it time?" she asked softly. Kronos nodded. "But I don't want to go." "You must," he said gently. "Your thread still has stories to write." She stood slowly. The grass beneath her feet was warm now. The mist had parted, and the trees sang a farewell song only hearts could hear. Kronos reached into the folds of his robe and placed something in her palm, a single thread, the color of early dawn. "If ever you feel lost," he said, "hold this, and your path will remember you." Leora closed her fingers around it. "Will I see you again?" Kronos smiled. "You already have, and you will again, for all paths bend toward time." She gave him a last, grateful look, and turned. As she walked down the hill, the trees bowed slightly, the stones hummed low songs, and the stars in the pools blinked farewell. And when she opened her eyes in her small bed, under the soft rustle of morning rain, she felt different. Not older, not wiser, just steadier. She looked at her palm. Nothing was there. And yet, her hand felt warm. And from that day on, whenever time felt too fast or too slow, she would close her eyes, breathe deep, and listen. For she had once sat beside time itself and had learned that even waiting could shine. The days that followed felt different to Leora, though nothing outwardly had changed. The same sun peeked in through her bedroom window each morning, casting long golden lines across the floor. The same trees outside swayed in the same wind. And yet, something invisible had shifted, as if a bell had rung somewhere deep inside her, and its quiet echo now lived in her every breath. She found herself pausing more often, not out of distraction, but awareness. She noticed the way light moved across her ceiling at sunset, how shadows stretched and folded like soft fabric. She listened to the sound of her grandmother's knitting needles clicking in rhythm, the lull of the kettle's hiss as it boiled, the quiet creak of floorboards as her father passed by her door late at night. She began keeping a little notebook beneath her pillow. In it, she wrote not what had happened during her day, but the moments that shimmered the way a bird's song had echoed when she was sad, the exact color of the sky after rain, the feeling of a warm hand squeezing hers without words. She didn't know why she did it, only that each note felt like a thread being placed on an invisible loom. Weeks passed, and Leora began dreaming of the hill again, not every night, but when her soul felt most in need. In one dream, she found herself back beneath the silver-barked trees. Kronos was there. Of course, his fingers weaving the dusk into shape. But this time, there was someone else. A woman with hair the color of fallen leaves, eyes like calm rivers, and a voice that hummed before she even spoke. "This is Aina," Kronos said. "She is the keeper of stillness." Leora bowed slightly, instinctively. Aina smiled. "You have grown since last you came, even if only by heart." "I feel different," Leora said, "but I don't know why." "Because time has begun listening to you," Aina replied. She led Leora to a smaller loom of her own made, not of gold or silver, but woven reeds and threads of wind. "This loom is yours now," Aina said gently. "It will not create time, but it will remember it, and in remembering, it heals." "I don't know if I can," Leora whispered. "I still feel broken sometimes." Aina touched her shoulder. "Stillness is not the absence of feeling, little one. It is the embrace of it. Let your sorrow sit beside your joy, not beneath it. That is the weaving." Leora sat at her loom and began to weave. Her fingers fumbled at first, the threads slipping like water. But then she let go of the need to be perfect and simply allowed her heart to move. Thread by thread, she remembered. The day she laughed until she hiccuped. The moment her mother sang through the bathroom door while brushing her hair. The silence of the house after her grandfather's last breath, heavy, but not empty. She didn't need to explain them. The loom understood. And when she was done, the pattern that appeared was like mist painted in morning light, fragile, quiet, but undeniably real. Kronos watched from afar, nodding. "You are beginning to weave your own hours," he said. "Will I always need to come here in dreams?" she asked. Kronos shook his head. "One day, you will carry the hill within you, and then you will become a pathway for others." Leora blinked. "Others." "There are many who forget how to listen to time," Aina said. "They rush through moments as if life were a race to be won. But those like you can help them remember." Leora was quiet. It felt like a great responsibility. But it didn't feel heavy, more like a lantern placed gently in her hands. That night, as she drifted back to waking, she whispered to the stars above her bed, "I will try." And they twinkled softly in reply. In the days that followed, Leora began noticing people. Not in the usual way, not what they wore or what they said, but the way they moved through time. Some seemed lost, always rushing, their steps never landing. Others looked like they carried clocks inside their chests, ticking too loud for them to rest. A few, like her grandmother, seemed to hold stillness in their very breath, wrapping others in calm without needing to speak. She started doing little things small, gentle offerings to the people around her, slipping a kind note into her teacher's desk drawer, holding the door for an old man whose hands trembled, sitting beside a quiet boy during lunch, not speaking, just listening. No one told her to. It simply felt like the threads asked for it. One evening, as the first stars blinked into the sky, Leora sat at her windowsill and took out her little notebook. On the last page, she drew a hill tall, mist-wrapped, with silver trees swaying gently at the top. At the center, she drew a loom. And underneath, she wrote, "Somewhere in me, the weaving continues." Then she closed her eyes and let herself drift back to the hill, back to the quiet, back to the time that waited, not with pressure, but with patience. Years passed, as they always do, not in a straight line, but in little ripples and soft spirals. Leora grew, as all children do. though her heart remained strangely untouched by the urgency that seemed to surround her peers. Where others chased time, she still walked beside it, like an old friend. She was 12 now, and the world expected her to be louder, faster, more grown up. But Leora remained quiet. She moved through hallways like the wind through reeds present, but never rushed. Some called her strange. Others said she daydreamed too much. But Leora didn't mind, because at night, when her eyes closed and her breath slowed, the hill of time returned to her. It no longer came as mist, or in dreams she couldn't recall. It lived now in a clear place behind her eyes, a soft hill always waiting, always open. And this time, when she arrived, Kronos was not alone. There stood a new figure, tall and cloaked in deep twilight blue, with hair like falling ink and eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. "This," Kronos said, "is Meneme. She is the keeper of memory." Meneme bowed her head. Her voice, when she spoke, was like a flute played far in the distance. "I have been watching you, Leora," she said, "and I have seen how gently you carry the weight of what others forget." "I don't understand," Leora replied, heart fluttering. Meneme stepped closer. "Every kind act you offer, every moment of silence you hold for someone else becomes a memory thread. You gather them without realizing it, and now your thread is nearly full. Leora looked at Kronos, who nodded solemnly. "It is time," he said, "for you to weave not only your time, but another's." "A full tapestry?" Leora asked, voice barely a whisper. "No," Name said, "a gift." From within her sleeve, she produced a bundle of soft, silver-threaded cloth, shimmering with pale blues and deep purples, a dream's reflection in water. She offered it to Leora. "This," she said, "is the thread of remembering. It is given only once to those who are ready. It can be offered to someone who has forgotten joy, or purpose, or that they are worthy of being loved." Leora held it gently. It pulsed in her palms, warm, steady, alive. "But how will I know who needs it?" she asked. Kronos answered, "Your heart already knows." That morning, Leora woke with the thread still warm in her mind. She felt its quiet hum as she brushed her teeth, packed her bag, walked through the streets bathed in pale gold. At school, she watched, waited, and then she saw him. A boy older than her by 2 years sat at the edge of the field during recess. He didn't speak, didn't play. His eyes were like closed windows, and he flinched slightly when others passed too close. She didn't know his name, but she felt the pull, that soft, inner tug she had learned to trust. Leora walked over slowly and sat beside him, not speaking, not pushing. At first, he didn't even glance at her, but then, when the silence between them had settled like a calm lake, he whispered, "Do you believe in time travel?" Leora looked up, smiling gently. "I believe in threads." He turned toward her, curious despite himself. "What do you mean?" She opened her notebook and showed him a page filled with lines, not sentences. Just images, a dog's paw print, a cracked teacup, a feather caught in wind, a pair of shoes without feet in them. "They're memories," she said. "Yours, mine, everyone's. Sometimes we lose them. Sometimes we carry too many, but sometimes we get to offer them back." He stared at the page, then looked at her. "I used to draw things like that," he said quietly. Before everything felt gray." Without a word, Leora tore the page out and offered it to him. "It's yours now," she said. "You can weave what comes next." That night, as stars blinked softly outside her window, Leora returned to the hill. Meneme was waiting. "You gave the thread," she said. "I didn't mean to," Leora said. "I just knew." Meneme placed a hand over Leora's chest, and now, your loom has changed. Kronos approached. "Come see." They led her to her small loom, once made of reed and breath. But now, it shimmered with moonlight and soft music. A second frame had grown beside the first. "This," Kronos said, "is the loom of echoes. For you are no longer just a weaver of your own time. You are now a weaver of echoes, those gentle ripples that spread outward, touching lives you may never see. Leora's eyes filled with quiet awe. "You mean I can help others remember?" "You already do," Nim said. Kronos placed a new spool in her hands. It shimmered with iridescent threads that hummed like lullabies. "These," he said, "are the threads of those who almost forgot, those who once held joy and let it slip, those who thought love was behind them. Now they will return, through you." Leora placed the thread on her loom and began to weave. As she did, somewhere far away, a mother suddenly remembered the song she used to hum while pregnant. A lonely man, walking home in the rain, looked up and smiled for the first time in months. A child who had not spoken in days suddenly whispered to a flower. Echoes. From that night onward, Leora lived in two worlds, one of ticking clocks, school bells, and growing limbs, and one where time curved like poetry and memory sang itself back into the world. She became, quietly, a keeper of threads. And the hill of time, it remained mist-wrapped, eternal waiting for all who wandered too far into silence, and were ready to listen again. There are threads in the loom of time that shimmer like sunlight, soft and golden, but there are others quiet ones, darker threads that hum with hollow echoes, with memories too painful to hold and yet too heavy to forget. Kronos called them the threads of loss. One night, as the wind outside whispered of changing seasons, Leora returned to the hill with a weight in her chest she could not name. No one had spoken harshly to her. No disaster had happened, but still, something inside her felt missing. The mist parted before her, as it always did, and the silver-barked trees bent low in greeting. Her loom of echoes stood waiting steady, glowing softly, but beside it now stood a figure she had never seen before. He was cloaked in layers of gray and dark blue, with hair that flowed like night rivers, and a face both ancient and ageless. His eyes held no sparkle, but they were not empty, they were deep, deep like wells that had seen all the tears the world had ever wept. Kronos stood beside him, silent. The new figure turned toward Leora and bowed slowly. "I am Lethe," he said, "the keeper of loss." Leora's breath caught. "Loss has a name?" she asked. "All things have a name," Lethe replied, "even what we forget." He walked slowly to her loom and placed upon it a bundle of tangled thread, knotted, frayed, and dark as ink. It pulsed with a strange energy, heavy yet fragile. "What is this?" she asked, kneeling beside it. Lethe spoke softly. "It is the thread of one who has forgotten not just joy, but even the shape of what they lost, a thread unraveling, a soul adrift." Leora touched it and felt it a chill, a tremble, and something more heartbreaking than sadness, numbness. This was not pain. This was the absence of feeling, a silence that had gone too long. "Can I help?" she whispered. Lethe looked at her. "You may try, but this thread cannot be mended like others. It must be walked." Walked. Kronos nodded now. "There are some threads so lost that to understand them, one must step inside. You must journey through this person's memory, not to change it, but to carry a lantern through it." Leora closed her eyes, nodded once, and wrapped the thread gently around her wrist. At once, the hill faded. She found herself standing in a gray forest. The trees were bare, their bark flaking like old paper. The sky was clouded, neither day nor night, and the wind whispered names that faded before they finished. In the distance, she saw a figure curled up on a bench made of stone, hands pressed to their face. The figure looked neither old nor young, man nor woman. They looked faded. Leora approached gently, her steps making no sound. "Hello," she said softly. The figure did not move. "I'm not here to change anything," she continued, "only to walk with you for a little while." Still, the figure said nothing, but they did lift their head just enough for Leora to see eyes that held nothing. So she sat beside them. She did not ask what was wrong. She did not speak of hope. She simply reached into her pocket and pulled out the tiniest thread of gold she had kept from her own loom. She held it between her fingers, letting it sway. And then, without knowing why, she began to hum. Not a song she had learned, but one that rose from her bones. A song without words, made of memory and silence and something like light. The figure beside her blinked once, then again. "Is that real?" they whispered. Leora nodded. "It's warm," the figure said. "I forgot warm." Leora offered the thread to them. "You don't have to carry everything," she said. "Just hold this, just for now." The figure took the thread. Their hands trembled, but they did not let go. When Leora returned to the hill, Lethe was waiting. "You lit a lantern," he said. "I didn't fix them," Leora replied. "No," Lethe said, "but you reminded them that light exists, and sometimes that is enough." He reached forward and touched her shoulder. "You are no longer just a keeper of echoes, Leora. You are now a bearer of return, one who helps the lost remember what they dared not feel." Kronos approached and added a new thread to her loom, a deep midnight hue, with a shimmer like tear-streaked glass. It pulsed gently as it joined the tapestry. "You will find many such threads," he said. "Each will ask something different of you. But remember this, you do not carry them alone." Leora looked at her hands. They were small, still, but they were steady. "I'm ready," she whispered. Lethe bowed to her once more. "Then go gently, and remind the world that loss is not the end, only a turning." The next time Leora returned to the hill, something felt different. The mist was still there, curling around her ankles like it always did. The silver-barked trees still shimmered faintly in the windless air. And yet, a weight hung in the branches, a stillness not peaceful, but paused. Kronos stood at her loom, his hands folded. Meneme sat beneath the memory tree, silent. And Lethe waited near the edge of the grove, arms crossed over his chest, his eyes shadowed. Leora looked from one to the other. "What's wrong?" she asked. Kronos motioned gently to her loom. "Look," he said. She stepped closer. Her loom of echoes still glowed threads, woven with care and patience. But there, near the center, a thread had begun to fray. It was pale pink at the edges, but the center had turned colorless, not black, not gray, but the absence of all color. It trembled softly, as if unsure it still belonged. Leora reached out to touch it and gasped. A memory slipped through her fingers like cold water. She saw a garden, a woman's hand brushing her hair back, laughter in the wind, and then nothing, just white. She blinked. I don't remember," she said. Kronos's face was grave. "A part of your time is unraveling." "Why?" Lethe's voice was gentle, because even those who help others remember must sometimes walk through forgetting themselves. Meneme approached now. She placed her hand over Leora's chest, right where her heartbeat lived. "This thread," she said, "belongs to your mother." The name landed softly, but it did not echo. "My mother," Leora repeated, confused. Meneme nodded. "The one who left. The one who promised she'd return. You've carried that waiting for so long, so quietly, that it has begun to slip into silence." Leora's voice wavered, "But I thought I had made peace with it. I thought I had woven it." "You did," Kronos said. "But time is not a single thread. It loops, it returns." Lethe stepped forward now. In his hand was a small, smooth stone black, with a shimmer of silver mist across its surface. "You must walk into your own forgetting," he said, "not to reclaim it, but to learn what lies beneath it." Leora took the stone and closed her eyes, and in a single breath she fell inward. She awoke in a quiet house. Not her own, not the one with warm window light and the scent of cinnamon, but one she only half remembered. The walls were pale, the furniture soft-edged. A single photo sat face down on a dusty shelf. She wandered room by room. Every corner stirred something, a whisper of laughter, the hum of lullabies, the echo of goodbyes. In the kitchen, she saw a teacup cracked. She picked it up and held it close. A flash, her mother, standing by the window, humming, the smell of lemon in the air, her hands brushing flour from her apron. Then a door, closing. Silence. Leora sank to the floor, clutching the cup. I waited. She whispered into the empty room. I kept waiting. Her voice cracked. But what if she's not coming back? What if I've been holding a ghost? No one answered. Until... I never left your thread, came a voice soft as dusk. Leora looked up. And there, seated across the table, was the echo of her mother. Not alive, not gone, but a memory given shape by the thread unraveling. She looked tired, but kind, older than Leora remembered. You've grown, the echo said. I forgot you, Leora said. No, the echo replied. You protected yourself. You kept the parts that were softest, wrapped in quiet. Leora's tears fell freely now. I didn't know how to carry both missing you and still living. Her mother nodded. That's what loss does. It teaches us to hold joy and sorrow in the same palm. The echo stood, walked to her, and cupped her cheek. You don't need to hold on to me, she said. I will always live in the thread you weave. Then gently, like morning fog, she faded. When Leora awoke, she was lying beneath the memory tree on the hill. Meneme sat beside her, and Kronos waited quietly at her loom. The pale thread had changed. It now shimmered again, not bright, but soft, like candlelight behind glass. Its center was a swirl of golden dusk, memory and morning, fused. You did not lose her, Kronos said. You let her live differently. Meneme nodded. This is what healing looks like. Not forgetting, not holding on too tightly, but weaving with space for both love and absence. Lethe placed the black stone beside her loom. You now know how to walk your own forgetting, he said. That makes you ready for what comes next. Leora stood, slowly. What does come next, she asked. Kronos looked toward the edge of the hill, where mist curled more thickly than ever before. There are threads not of memory or loss, he said, but of becoming. And to weave them, you must meet the one who holds them. Leora blinked. And who is that? Kronos smiled softly. You. Leora stood at the edge of the hill, where the mist curled thick and restless, like clouds unsure whether to become storm or snow. The path before her was no longer clear, not a soft trail of moss and memory, but a shimmering haze, where every step seemed both invitation and mystery. Kronos stood beside her, silent. Meneme, Lethe, they too remained quiet, their eyes deep and still. Leora turned to them, her voice steadier than she expected. You said there are threads not of memory or loss, but of becoming. Kronos nodded slowly. Time does not only carry what was, it also holds what may be. And that is a thread only you can choose. She looked again into the mist. Who waits for me there? Kronos smiled faintly. Not who waits, but who you will meet. Leora took a breath. She felt no fear, only a quiet thrum in her chest, like a lantern being lit from within. She stepped forward. The mist swallowed her gently. It did not suffocate or blind, it cradled, as if shielding her from noise, expectation, even her own thoughts. She walked slowly, her footsteps soundless, around her. The fog began to pulse faintly, not with light, but with possibility. And then, in the distance, she saw a figure. It stood facing away from her, cloaked in soft white robes, its hair braided with threads of starlight and silence. As she approached, the figure turned. Leora gasped softly. It was her, but older, not just in years and presence. This version of her stood tall, calm, and radiant in a way that had nothing to do with perfection. There were scars on her hands, lines beneath her eyes, but her gaze held galaxies. You're me, Leora said. The older Leora smiled. I am one version of who you could become. They stood in stillness for a long moment. You look peaceful, Leora whispered. I've walked many threads. The older one replied, some broke, some unraveled, some I never chose. But all of them led me here. Leora lowered her eyes. I've only just begun, and already. It feels so much. You've held more than most, the elder said gently, but now, it is time to hold yourself. She extended a hand, and in her palm appeared a thread unlike any Leora had ever seen. It shimmered in layers, colors shifting, as she looked sometimes golden, sometimes blue, sometimes as clear as breath on glass. It pulsed, not with memory, not with sorrow, but with choice. This, her older self said, is the thread of becoming. It does not bind you to a past or to a destiny. It listens to your intention, and each time you weave it, it asks a question. What question? Leora asked. The older Leora placed the thread in her palm. Who do you wish to be now? The question echoed, not just in her ears, but in her bones. She thought of everything, of sitting beside Kronos and watching time bend gently in his hands, of weaving echoes with Nemi under a sky of memory, of holding a thread of sorrow with Lethe and walking into the silence of loss, of lighting lanterns in others, of forgetting and remembering again. And now this, a thread not of the past, but of the next breath. She closed her eyes. I want to be kind, she whispered, not because I must, but because it feels like singing. The thread shimmered softly. I want to be curious, she continued, even when things feel heavy, especially then. The thread brightened. I want to keep weaving, even when my hands shake. The thread warmed. She looked up at her older self. Is that enough? The older Leora smiled. It's always enough. She touched Leora's forehead gently, and in that moment, all the versions of Leora the laughing child, the quiet weaver, the brave lantern-bearer, the girl who waited by the window, all of them gathered within her. Not erased, not overwritten, but woven together. And when she opened her eyes, she was standing at the hill once more. Kronos stood at her loom, waiting. He said nothing, only stepped aside. Leora walked forward and lifted the new thread. Its color shifted again as she touched it, now calm green, now brave crimson, now soft silver. She wove it into the tapestry, and for the first time, the loom did something it had never done before. It pulsed, then sang. A deep, resonant sound, not music, not voice, but a harmonic that seemed to ripple through every leaf, every stone, every star above the hill. Kronos bowed his head. The loom of time recognizes you now, he said, not just as a weaver, but as a shaper. Leora stepped back. Her breath was steady. What does that mean? Lethe answered, from where he stood beneath the trees. It means that your threads will no longer only echo what has been, but invite what might be. Manim added softly, you carry not just the past. Leora, you now walk beside the future. She looked down at her hands. They were hers, small, human, imperfect, but they no longer trembled. They glowed. And far below the hill, in the waking world, a breeze shifted. A flower bloomed out of season. A lost dream stirred. The world, it seemed, had begun to listen back. The first time someone else arrived on the hill of time without being called, the air changed. Leora felt it instantly. She had been weaving quietly under the silver trees, guiding new threads of becoming into her loom, when a ripple passed through the mist, not one of memory or sorrow or silence, but of confusion. The mist near the edge of the grove stirred more violently than usual, spinning and tumbling in uneven spirals. The trees stopped rustling. Even the loom paused its soft hum. Kronos appeared beside her, not walking, not materializing, but simply being there, as if he had always been. You feel it, he asked. Leora nodded. Something's coming, but it doesn't know why. Kronos's expression was neither worried nor calm. It was curious. She's young, he said, and angry, a rare combination on the hill. Leora stood slowly. You want me to go? Kronos shook his head. No, I want you to greet her. The mist peeled away like a curtain. There, standing at the threshold of the hill, was a girl perhaps a year younger than Leora had been when she first came. Her clothes were rumpled. Her fists were clenched. Her breath came in sharp bursts. And her eyes were wild with confusion. "I don't know where I am," she shouted into the fog. "I didn't ask for this." Leora approached slowly, hands open. "You're safe," she said gently. The girl turned sharply. "Who are you?" "My name is Leora," she replied, "and this place is called the Hill of Time." The girl snorted. "That sounds fake." Leora smiled. "It does, doesn't it?" The girl crossed her arms. "I was just in my room. I was yelling at my mom. Then suddenly, fog, trees, and now you." Leora's voice softened. "Time listens, even when we scream." The girl blinked. "I didn't mean to come here." "No one ever does," Leora said. "Not the first time." There was silence between them. Then, "My name's Marin," the girl said reluctantly. Leora nodded. "Hello, Marin." They walked together toward the grove. Marin was hesitant, her eyes darting at every glimmering tree and pool of starlight water. When they reached the clearing where Leora's loom sat, Marin stared at it. "Is that a harp?" she asked. Leora chuckled. "No, but it makes music when you're ready." Marin frowned. "I don't like music." "Why not?" "Because it makes me feel—" Leora looked at her gently. "Maybe that's exactly why it's here." Marin said nothing. Kronos appeared then, watching from a distance. But he didn't approach. He merely stood as he had once done for Leora, and let the thread of meeting unwind as it would. Marin walked up to the loom and hovered her hands above it. "What does it do?" Leora didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a spool of thread, bright red, and woven with flickers of storm gray and glints of silver. She offered it. "This," she said, "is a moment you haven't chosen yet. You can weave it, or you can leave it." Marin stared. "What if I mess it up?" "Then it becomes a thread with a knot, and that's okay too." She hesitated, then took the thread. The moment her fingers touched the loom, her body tensed. The loom vibrated, not softly, but like thunder under silk. Images flickered behind Marin's eyes, a shattered plate on the floor. Her mother's eyes filled with hurt. A slammed door. A long silence. And beneath it all, the smallest voice in the back of her heart saying, "She doesn't see me." Marin gasped and pulled back. "I didn't mean for that to happen," she whispered. Leora stepped beside her. "But it did. And it's part of the thread." Marin turned to her, voice trembling. "I don't want to feel this." "You don't have to feel it alone." Leora reached forward, placed her hands over Marin's, and together, they touched the loom. This time the thread moved. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but it moved. And as it wove itself into the tapestry, it shifted. The red faded into blush pink. The gray softened into pale lavender. The silver brightened into light. Marin blinked, tears in her eyes. "It's not as sharp now." "No," Leora said, "because now it's carried." Marin sat down slowly, her shoulders dropping for the first time. "I thought I was angry at her," she said, "but really, I think I was just scared." Leora nodded. "Anger is often fear with armor on." Marin was quiet for a long time. "Then, can I come back here?" Leora smiled. "This place is a part of you now. It will return when you need it." "And you?" "I'll be here, or someone like me." That night, as Marin faded back to her world, the hill grew quiet again. Leora returned to her loom, but beside it now was something new. A second loom. Not hers. It was smaller, newer still forming, but it shimmered softly in the color of dawn. Kronos stepped beside her. "Each person you help will leave a thread here," he said. "And over time, a new grove will grow." Leora looked at the loom, the grove of weavers. Kronos smiled, a forest of those who choose to listen. And above the hill, for the first time in its long, quiet eternity, something new bloomed. A tiny blossom, not of time past, but of time yet to come. It began as a whisper, a tremor so faint it might have been mistaken for wind, or the soft stirring of the leaves. But Leora knew. The hill of time had never trembled before. She was at her loom, weaving a thread of stillness left behind by an old woman's final breath. When she felt it, a flutter beneath her feet, as if something beneath the hill had turned over in its sleep. Kronos appeared beside her, his face unreadable. "You felt it too," Leora said. He nodded once. "The loom beneath the hill has shifted." Leora froze. "There's a loom beneath the hill." Kronos did not answer right away. Instead, he walked to the edge of the clearing and looked out across the mists, which now swirled faster than usual, restless, unquiet. "The loom you and I use is the loom of choices, of memory, of healing," he said. "But beneath the hill, buried in silence, lies the first loom." Leora stepped beside him. "What does it weave?" Kronos' voice was low. "It weaves what even time has tried to forget." Later that night, as she sat beneath the memory tree, Mneme came to her silent, solemn. "I remember the first loom," she whispered, "but I wish I didn't." "What is it?" Leora asked again. Mneme knelt in the moss and traced a spiral in the earth. Before time was gentle, it was wild. Before memory, there was instinct. The first loom weaves the raw, the primal moments not touched by kindness, but forged in fear, hunger, anger. It holds the first heartbreaks of the world. Leora shivered. "But why is it waking now?" Lethe answered from the shadows. "Because something forgotten wants to be seen." Over the next few days, the hill changed. The pools that once shimmered like starlight began reflecting not stars, but shadows, broken shapes that did not match their surroundings. The wind began whispering in harsher tones. Threads on Leora's loom began to tangle without warning. And then came the dream. A dream that wasn't a dream at all. She stood alone on the hill, but the sky was red not with sunset, but with something older. The trees were leafless. Her loom was gone. And in its place stood a crack in the ground. From that crack came a voice. Low, heavy, familiar in a way that chilled her. "You have woven only light, child. But what of the shadows you left behind?" She couldn't speak. The crack widened. "Time is not whole without its wounds." She woke with a cry. Kronos was waiting. "You must choose," he said. "Choose what?" "To go down." "Down where?" "To the core of the hill, to face what you have not yet dared to touch, not in others, but in yourself." The descent began the next evening. Kronos handed her a single thread black as obsidian, yet threaded with specks of gold so faint they looked like stars behind storm clouds. "This is the thread of reckoning," he said. "It will lead you, but it will not protect you." Leora nodded. Holding the thread close, she turned to Mneme and Lethe. "Will I come back?" she asked. Lethe's eyes were steady. "You may not return the same." Mneme pressed a small crystal against Leora's heart. "But you will return true." The entrance lay beneath the roots of the oldest tree on the hill, a tree none of them ever approached. Its bark was scorched in places, its branches bent inward like fingers trying to hold something in. As Leora stepped beneath it, the world above grew silent. The tunnel that led down was narrow at first, a tunnel of root and stone, but it widened, slowly, into caverns of flickering darkness. There were walls covered in forgotten names, pools where reflections moved before she did. And at the bottom, the first loom. It was vast, larger than the hill itself, floating in midair above a pit that had no bottom. Its threads were not spun, they slithered alive, hissing, glowing in impossible colors. Leora approached slowly. The loom pulsed. "Why have you come?" it asked. "To remember," she said. "Even what you were not meant to see it." She nodded. The loom spun a thread before her heavy, hot to the touch, almost burning. She saw herself younger, forgotten on a day she had locked away. A day when no one came to pick her up from school. A day she sat alone in the rain, soaked to the bone, watching every car pass and knowing none were hers. A thread of abandonment. Another thread came. The time she lied to her friend and saw their trust shatter. A time she wished someone else would feel pain so she wouldn't feel so alone. The first loom showed it all. Not to punish, but to witness. Leora fell to her knees. "I didn't know I was still carrying all of it." The loom did not comfort. It did not condemn. It simply said, "Weaving light means nothing if you cannot sit with the dark." She took the threads, one by one, and placed them on her heart. They burned, they cried, but they did not break her. They remade her. And when she rose again, hands trembling, she reached into her pouch and took out one final thread, her own thread of becoming. She wove it through the first loom, not to tame it, not to fix it, but to meet it. The loom shuddered, then softened. It released a single thread back into her hands. It was gray, not dull, but full of depth, the color of storm clouds, of wisdom, of midnight before the dawn. She took it and climbed. When she returned to the hill, the others waited. She stepped into the grove exhausted but whole. Kronos approached and bowed. "You have done what even I could not." Lethe placed a hand over her heart. "You have remembered your shadow." And Menemi smiled, tears in her eyes. "And in doing so, you have made time whole again." The sky above the hill shifted, and for the first time, both stars and shadows danced together. Balanced. True. The stars had never looked so clear. Above the hill, where mist once curled endlessly, and the sky shifted like a slow breath. The heavens now shimmered with clarity, not because the fog had vanished, but because Leora had learned to see through it. Since her return from the first loom, everything had changed. The hill was no longer just a sanctuary of healing threads and soft echoes. It had grown deeper, wider, more alive, as if it, too, had breathed through a long-forgotten grief. And now it waited. Leora stood at the center of the grove, barefoot in the moss, her loom of becoming humming gently at her side, around her. The others gathered: Kronos, Neme, Lethe, and those she had once guided, the boy who remembered joy, the girl who tamed her anger, even a child made of stardust and sleep. They stood not as teachers and students, but as witnesses. Kronos stepped forward. "It is time," he said. Leora didn't speak. She only nodded, heart steady, breath deep. Kronos raised his hand. From within his palm appeared a small sphere of woven threads, glowing not with one light, but with many: blue, gold, silver, black, green, crimson. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "This," he said, "is the core thread." Leora stepped closer. "The heart of the hill," he continued. "It has been passed from guardian to guardian since time first dared to feel." He placed it in her hands. And it spoke, not with words, but with sensation. The weight of first loss, the shimmer of first love, the terror of choices, the wonder of forgiveness, the silence of eternity. It all lived there. And as she held it, the core thread responded, shifting, softening, aligning with the beat of her spirit. The mist around the hill rippled once, then settled. Lethe stepped forward, carrying an item wrapped in deep navy cloth. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a simple cloak, the color of dusk and memory, stitched with fine thread that sparkled like the spine of a forgotten book. "This is the mantle of the guardian," he said. "It does not make you more. It simply makes you known to the hill, to the threads, and to yourself." Leora took the cloak, and as she placed it around her shoulders, it molded to her frame, light, warm, and weightless. Yet it held centuries within it. Menem approached last. In her hands was a crystal clear as truth, shaped like a tear. "You will need this when silence grows too loud," she said. "It is the memory lens. It does not show the past, but reveals where remembering still hurts." Leora took it gently, nodding. And then silence. Kronos turned to the others gathered beneath the trees. "Leora," he said, his voice carrying like wind across time, "has walked the threads of sorrow, memory, silence, and choice. She has woven not just for herself, but for others. She has sat with the wild loom beneath the hill and dared to witness what time itself tried to bury." He looked at her not with pride, but with reverence. "Now, she becomes the guardian of time." As the words faded into the stars, something ancient stirred. The hill pulsed, the mist danced, and above them, a new constellation formed not of gods or beasts, but of a loom, a tree, and a small flame cradled by hands. It was her mark. From that moment forward, Whenever a soul became too tired to walk their own time, whenever memory ached and silence screamed, whenever choice felt like a storm, the hill would whisper her name, and she would come. That night, Leora sat alone beside her loom, tracing the threads with slow fingers. The air was soft. The stars hummed. Kronos came and sat beside her. "You no longer need me," he said, his smile gentle. "But I still want you here," she whispered. He chuckled. "I will always be near. Time does not leave those who tend it." She turned to him. "Will I be ready for what comes next?" Kronos looked out at the vast horizon where mist met memory. "No guardian ever is," he said, "but all who become one carry the thread of courage." Leora smiled, not because she was confident, but because she finally understood. Courage wasn't loud, it didn't shine. It was quiet. Like moss. Like weaving. Like choosing, every day, to listen even when afraid. Far away in the waking world, a child cried in the dark. A memory stirred. A thread shimmered. And in the mist behind the stars, Leora began to walk. The sky was still. The stars were quiet. And the hill, for the first time in memory, held its breath. Leora stood at the edge of the grove beneath the tree of threads, her cloak fluttering softly in a wind that did not belong to any known season. Her loom of becoming glowed steadily beside her, yet its rhythm faltered as if waiting for a new thread that had no name. Kronos had not appeared that night, nor had Menemi or Lethe. It was not absence. It was reverence. They knew this was hers alone to face. It began with a sound. A soft cry not of pain but of longing. Leora turned toward the sound and found something unexpected. Not a child. Not a spirit. But a presence. It hovered a few steps away. Shaped vaguely like a human infant, but made of light, still forming its edges, wavered like candle flame in a glass jar, flickering with colors that didn't yet exist. Its eyes, though barely formed, held oceans. "Who are you?" Leora whispered. The being blinked slowly. "I do not know." Leora stepped closer, kneeling. "Do you have a name?" "No, I have not been given one. I have not been born." The guardian's breath caught. "You are not yet real." The child of light tilted its head. "I am real in possibility, but not in time." Leora sat cross-legged in the grass. She knew, deep in her bones, that the hill had never received one such as this, a being from unwritten time. "You came here," she said gently. "Why?" The child trembled. "Because something is closing, a door I am meant to enter through. A birth. Yes or no, that door is uncertain. That future flickers." Leora closed her eyes. She could feel it now faint. At the farthest edge of her perception, a family debating, a soul ready, a world unsure. The child before her was not only unborn, it was unclaimed by fate. A possible life, not yet chosen. From her satchel, Leora drew out the memory lens Menemi had given her. She placed it gently over her heart. Through it, she could not see the past but the wound in time. And there, it was a rippling tear in the weave, not torn by trauma, but by hesitation, a thread that almost existed, flickering in and out of form. She turned back to the being. "Do you want to come into the world?" The light being was quiet for a long while. "Then I want to be known, to be given time, even for a moment." Leora swallowed. The choice was not hers to make. And yet she had been given the thread of guardianship. She turned to her loom. It stood silent. Waiting. She reached into the deepest part of her pouch and pulled out a thread she had never used, one she had never known existed until now. It was clear, but strong. Delicate, but firm. It shimmered with maybes. This was the thread of becoming possible. "I cannot give you a future," she whispered. "But I can give you a shape." The light child moved closer. She touched the thread to the loom and began to weave. With every motion of her hand, visions form. A baby's cry in a hospital room. A mother unsure, but cradling anyway. A first breath. A single step. A drawing on a crumpled page. A name written on a birth certificate. A future not yet written, but no longer forgotten. She wasn't creating a life. She was acknowledging it. And with that recognition, the loom responded. It did not hum. It sang. A new note. A sound the hill had never made before, soft, rising, filled with yearning and grace. When Leora looked up, the light child had changed. No longer flickering. Still not fully solid, but now glowing with presence. Thank you, the child said. For what, Leora asked, her voice trembling. For seeing me. And then it faded. Not vanished. Not erased. But placed somewhere in the great weave of possibility. A family felt a pull in their hearts they could not name. A mother placed her hand on her belly and paused. A father began to speak a name he'd only heard in dreams. A new thread had been made. Not in the past. Not in memory. But in permission. When Leora returned to the tree, Kronos was waiting. He did not speak. He only held out his hands, and in them, the core thread she had once carried now pulsed with a new hue. A color that had never existed before. Leora placed her hand over it. It beat beneath her palm. Not as something done, but as something beginning. Kronos spoke at last. You have woven what even time feared, that which had not yet been. She looked at him. What was that, child? Kronos' eyes were soft. A soul on the edge of silence. And now, Kronos smiled. Now, a voice still waiting to be sung. That night, beneath a sky filled with quiet stars, Leora sat at her loom. A single thread, barely visible, hovered above it, clear as breath, bright as first light. She did not weave it. Not yet. She simply let it be. And somewhere in the world, time stirred. Not with certainty, but with hope. Leora had seen beginnings. She had woven the laughter of children yet to be born. She had shaped the sorrow of mothers who had waited too long. She had carried memory, mended loss, welcomed the forgotten, and honored the unborn. But tonight the hill was silent. Not in peace, but in preparation. She woke from a dreamless sleep with a single word resting on her lips, spoken not aloud, but deep in her spirit. And she rose slowly. Outside, the sky above the hill was not as she remembered it. The stars did not blink. The wind did not sing. Even the mist had vanished, not fled, but stilled. And she was alone. Truly alone. There were no echoes of Kronos waiting in the grove. Neme's laughter did not dance in the memory trees. Lethe's silence was gone. Even her loom, ever patient, ever pulsing, was gone. All that remained was the stone circle at the heart of the hill, long untouched, and in its center a single chair, carved from woven root and moonlight. She walked toward it. Each step felt heavier, older. When she reached it, she saw that upon the chair sat a spool, simple, unmarked, wrapped in a single black thread with no shimmer, no light, no shape. She knew at once what it was. The thread of departure. Leora sat down. Her hands trembled as they lifted the thread. It pulsed, faintly, not with life, but with rest, with release. She turned it over, whispering to the wind, "Is it time?" And from the still air came a voice she had not heard in a long while. Time does not take, it asks. Kronos. But he was not standing beside her. He was not looming in presence or guiding her hand. He was memory now, echo, thread. Then I ask, she said aloud, why now? The voice was quiet. Because even weavers must be unwoven. Leora sat with the thread in her lap for what might have been hours or centuries. She thought of her first steps on the hill, of the first time she heard the loom hum beneath her fingers, of the moment she watched a thread of sorrow soften in the wind. She thought of Marin, the girl filled with rage. She thought of the unborn child of light. She thought of the first loom, trembling beneath the roots of the world. And then she thought of herself alone, a child who once waited for her mother by the window, the ache of absence like a stone in her chest. She smiled, not in triumph, but in completion. Then, just as she reached for the thread of departure, a hand touched hers. She looked up startled. There, standing before her, was a boy, no older than 10. His eyes wide, curious, cautious. He wore a cloak far too big for his shoulders that shimmered like dawn through mist. Lyora blinked. "Who are you?" she asked, though she already knew. The boy looked at the thread in her hand. "Is that the end?" Lyora hesitated. "I thought it was—" The boy looked around. "It's quiet. It always is, when something is about to change." He nodded. "I heard your name in a dream. The stars whispered it." Leora's heart pulsed once. "And what did they say?" He smiled. "They said follow the threads." He stepped closer. "I think I'm supposed to learn." Leora looked at the thread one more time. Then gently, she placed it down. "Not forgotten. Not denied. Just postponed." She rose from the chair and extended her hand. "Come," she said. The boy placed his fingers in hers. Together, they walked to the edge of the hill. And in the grove, her loom reappeared. Not alone. Beside it, a second one smaller, new. The loom of the next guardian. That night, the hill pulsed again. Not because something ended, but because something began again. Leora stood beside the boy as he placed his first thread upon the loom. It shimmered violet, then gold, then something no eye could name. "Do I have to be perfect?" he asked her. She smiled. "No, just present." And when the stars returned to their rhythm, and the trees began to whisper once more, and the wind sang its ancient lullabies, Leora stepped back. She watched as the boy wove. And though she would one day sit upon the chair of departure, that day was not today, because time had made its choice, and it had whispered it, softly, into the moss and sky and silence. We continue in a realm beyond war, beyond frost, beyond even the watchful gaze of Odin's ravens. There lay a quiet land hidden in the folds of mist and memory. It was not charted on any map of Midgard or Asgard. It had no gates, no guards, no pronouncements carved into stone. It simply was. Gentle hills rolled beneath silken clouds, and meadows hummed with colors not seen in any world of men. Here, time drifted like soft snow, and pain, though not forgotten, had learned to lie still. This was Air's realm, not a palace of gold, nor a temple built of power, but a garden, the garden of Air. Air, the healer, the one whose hands remembered every wound the world had ever known, the one whose silence soothed warriors more deeply than any chant or charm. She was neither goddess of war nor queen of fortune. She did not stand in halls of judgment or ride flaming chariots across the sky. Her domain was gentler and older. It began always with the sound of water, not the crash of waves or the fury of rain, but the trickling murmur of a spring fed from roots that drank from the edge of eternity. This spring lived at the center of her garden, nestled among stones covered in moss that knew the names of every sorrow ever spoken. And beside it Air waited, not as a sentinel but as a stillness. She sat upon a bench carved of living yew, wrapped in robes the color of first light. Her hair flowed like silver rivers across her shoulders, and her eyes, green as birch leaves, held the kindness of 1,000 years of listening. She did not speak unless needed. She did not reach unless asked. She simply tended. She tended the wounded birds who forgot how to fly. She tended the children of forgotten gods. She tended the ghosts who refused to rest. And sometimes, only sometimes, she tended to those still alive. This is the story of one such soul. A girl whose name had been scattered by wind, whose body bore no wound but whose spirit limped. She came to the garden not with footsteps, but with a sigh. No one knew her journey, not even she. She awoke beneath the willow trees with her hands curled like petals, and her breath, too soft for pain, above her. The sky glowed in the hue of healing, that strange gray blue before a storm remembers it as past. Air was already there. The girl did not speak. Air did not ask. Instead, she lifted a bowl of spring water and offered it. The girl took it in trembling fingers and drank. And with each swallow, a memory untied itself from her ribs, not in pain, but in peace. She remembered her mother's voice saying, "Hush," through a cracked door. She remembered the warmth of a dog who had never returned. She remembered the name she once whispered only to herself. And as the bowl emptied, tears fell. But not the kind that hurt. The kind that cleared. Air touched nothing, but the girl felt held. The garden knew. The wind wove around them, bringing petals that never withered. The willow trees leaned in without creaking. Even the soil sighed. And when night came, though no sun had passed, stars gathered low enough to be mistaken for lanterns. The girl slept, and the garden dreamed with her. Morning in the garden did not come with a burst of light, but with a breath. It stirred gently, a soft golden hue that pooled across moss and stone, warming petals and quiet roots. Dew whispered its farewells as the breeze passed through, and every leaf seemed to turn toward the sun that did not rise, but simply became. The girl woke slowly, as if from a dream she had not known she was dreaming. Her body was not sore. Though she had lain on the ground, her mind, though still tired, no longer trembled. Air was already there, not watching, not waiting, but simply present. The girl sat up beneath the willow, brushing away stray blossoms from her hair. She looked at Air, but said nothing. There was no need. The silence between them was neither awkward nor empty. It was fertile. Finally, the girl asked, "Where am I?" Air answered with a single word, "Here." It was not a riddle. It was the truth. The girl did not ask her own name. She was not ready to wear it yet. Instead, she stood. Her bare feet pressed into the cool moss. Her fingers reached for the air and curled, unsure of what they sought. Air motioned for her to follow. They walked. The garden had no borders, yet it never felt vast. Every path curved softly into another. No corners, no sharp lines. The world unfolded like memory, not demanding attention, but welcoming it if it came. They passed a grove where the trees hummed with quiet songs, in languages the girl did not know, but understood. A fox with amber eyes trotted past, pausing only to nod. Butterflies the size of teacups danced in slow spirals. Nothing rushed. Even the bees moved with the grace of falling leaves. Finally, they came to a circle of stones. In its center stood a tree. It was taller than any the girl had seen, with bark like smooth obsidian streaked with veins of silver. Its branches held no leaves, but were covered in threads, strands of light and shadow, color and calm, each drifting gently as if moved by thoughts, not wind. Air stood before it and placed her hand on its trunk. "This," she said, "is the tree of recall." The girl stepped closer. "What are the threads?" Ear looked at her, eyes soft. "They are pieces of healing moments remembered, reclaimed, retold." The girl reached out to one, a soft blue strand that shimmered like a forgotten lullaby. As her fingers brushed it, she heard laughter. Her own, running down a hallway, arms outstretched. She remembered the feel of worn wood beneath her feet, a door opening, someone kneeling, embracing her. And then it was gone. The thread floated back into stillness. She blinked. "It was real," she whispered. "All memories are," Air replied, "even when they hide." The girl sat at the base of the tree. The stones around her were warm, pulsing softly. "I don't remember who I am," she said. Air sat beside her. "You are becoming, that is enough." For many days or hours or seasons. For the garden did not care for such measures, the girl remained with Air. They spoke little. They walked much. Air never taught with words. She did not explain the names of herbs or ask questions the girl could not answer. Instead, she showed how to breathe into silence without trying to fill it, how to place one's hand on bark and listen, how to kneel beside pain without trying to solve it. They gathered petals that only bloomed when named aloud. They stitched with threads that only appeared when tears were shed. They listened to stories told by rain tapping on hollow logs. And the girl began to soften. Not in weakness, but in root. Her dreams no longer haunted her. They guided her. One night, she asked, "Why do you help?" Ear was silent a moment. Then, "Because I remember." "Remember what?" "What it is to break." The girl looked into Air's eyes and saw not only centuries of healing, but the echo of her own sorrow, not identical, but mirrored. You were broken once. All healers are, Air said gently. That is how we learn where to place our hands. On a day that felt like both spring and winter, the girl stood beside the stream at the garden's heart, the place where Air always began. Her reflection danced in the water, not as she was, but as she had been child, shadow, ember. She turned to Air. I think I remember my name. Air said nothing. The girl closed her eyes and spoke it. Not loudly, not with certainty, but with trust. As she did, the garden shifted. Not changed, revealed. The flowers bent slightly in greeting. The threads in the trees brightened. The stones sighed. And Air smiled. You have returned, she said. The girl looked at her, no longer unsure, no longer only broken. Yes, she whispered, but I'm not done, Emma. Air's eyes twinkled. Healing is not the end of pain, it is the beginning of presence. That evening, beneath a sky so full of stars they seemed to murmur, the girl lay beneath the willows once more. She was not empty. She was not whole, but she was awake. And beside her, Air whispered one final thing before sleep came. You will leave this garden one day, and when you do, carry no burden, only seeds. And so she dreamed not of forgetting, but of becoming. The days in the Garden of Air did not pass. They unfolded, one after another, like petals slowly opening beneath soft rain, without pressure or end. And now that the girl, now no longer nameless, had spoken her true name into the air, the garden seemed to breathe with her. It followed her rhythms, responded to her touch, and listened when she hummed lullabies that came from places she had not yet walked. Air continued her tending, but something had shifted. Where once the goddess moved alone, now she let the girl whose name was Lena walk beside her. She did not explain what to do, she did not instruct, she allowed. And Lena learned. She learned that healing was not in the hands, but in the pause before reaching. That listening did not mean waiting to speak, but anchoring oneself to another's breath. That sorrow, when met with silence and warmth, could melt into meaning. One afternoon, while Lena was kneeling beside the spring to gather a pale green blossom that only bloomed in shadows, she felt it, a presence. Not like Air's, not like the animals of the garden or the murmuring trees. Something else. It came like wind before rain, subtle, curious, unfamiliar. Lena stood slowly. The air in the garden shimmered not with light, but with attention. And from the willow edge stepped a figure. A boy perhaps 15 with ash on his hands and frost clinging to the folds of his coat. His eyes were wide, but not frightened. His posture uncertain, like someone unused to stillness. He looked at her, then at the garden, then back at her. What is this place? Lena did not answer right away. Instead, she looked to the place where Air always stood. It was empty. The goddess was gone, not absent, but withdrawn. Because this moment was Lena's. She took a breath and stepped forward. This is the Garden of Air, she said softly. A place where the broken come when they are too tired to pretend they are whole. The boy looked around. But I'm not hurt, he said, defensively. Lena tilted her head. You didn't come here with your body. He didn't answer. She motioned for him to sit. The stone bench beside the spring warmed instantly, as if the garden remembered this kind of arrival. He sat slowly, his shoulders stiff. Lena sat beside him but kept a gentle distance. After a long silence, the boy said, I don't sleep. Not really. I close my eyes, but my thoughts, they never turn off. And sometimes I feel like I'm screaming, even though I don't say anything. He stared at the ground. I woke up here, alone. I thought I died. Lena shook her head. You're still alive, just tired. He looked at her. His eyes were gray, clouded like stormy sky. And you are you, dead. She smiled faintly. No, I came here when I forgot how to feel. Now I remember. He didn't speak for a while. Then quietly, I don't even know how to begin. Lena stood and walked to the spring. She dipped her hand into the water. cupped it, then brought it back to him. She held the water in her palm, not in a bowl, just as air once had for her. "Drink," she said. He hesitated, then leaned forward and sipped. Nothing changed at first, but then a single tear rolled down his cheek. He blinked. "I forgot what that felt like." Lena nodded. "That's where it begins." In the hours or days that followed, the boy remained. His name was Kale, and though he did not know why he had been called to the garden, the soil seemed to welcome him nonetheless. He did not speak much, but when he did, the air softened. Lena walked with him as air once had with her. She did not teach. She did not press. She invited. They sat beside the tree of recall. Kale touched a thread and saw his sister, years younger, holding a book in trembling hands and laughing. He touched another and saw himself hiding beneath the stairs, wishing he could vanish. Another thread showed no image, only played a melody he'd hummed as a child, forgotten until now. Kale never wept loudly, but his silence changed. It became lighter. Lena saw it in the way he began to run his fingers over bark, the way he paused to watch the glow bug spiral over the pond, the way he leaned back on his elbows beneath the open sky and let the stars blink down without resisting their gaze. One night, as the garden slipped into its starlit hush, Kyle asked, "Why did air not come to me?" Lena looked up at the constellations. "She did," she said. He turned to her. She came in the form of a person who had once needed her, and stayed. Kale stared. "You?" Lena smiled. "Yes." The next morning, Kale was gone. Not vanished, returned. The willow tree, beneath which he had once sat, now held a small silver thread. Lena touched it. It played a memory. Laughter in the rain. Kale, older, holding the hand of a child. A voice saying, "It's okay to cry." The thread pulsed, then faded. Lena stood. Air was beside her once more. Neither spoke. There was no need. The garden had shifted again. Not because something had ended, but because something had been shared. Lena felt the warmth of her hands, the strength in her legs, the clarity in her breath. "I'm ready," she whispered. Air placed a seed in her palm. Lena looked down. It glowed faintly. "What is it?" she asked. "A garden," Air replied. "In me." Air nodded. "And one day, beyond you." That night, Lena sat beside the spring and held the seed in her hand. It pulsed softly, not with light, but with readiness. She did not know when she would leave the garden, but she knew now that she could. Because healing was never a place to stay forever. It was a place where the breath returned, where stillness made room for voice, and where one learned not just how to feel again, but how to help another do the same. There was no farewell in the Garden of Air. No gates to cross, no bridge to burn, no trumpet to signal a departure. When one is ready, the garden simply lets go, not with sadness, but with stillness. Lena woke beneath the willow. Her fingers curled around the small seed Air had given her. It no longer pulsed. It glowed quietly, like a breath held in the hush before dawn. She held it close to her heart, and the wind wrapped around her like a shawl. She stood. Air was not beside her, but Lena felt her presence not as a figure, but as an imprint in the moss, a warmth in the air, a hush in the leaves. She looked to the stream, the tree of recall, the stone bench where Kyle had once sat. All remained, and yet something had shifted. Lena whispered one word, "Thank you," and the world answered with silence, the most honest of blessings. Then the light changed. Not suddenly, but like the tide pulling back, revealing stones that had always been there. The colors dulled, the petals folded. The garden did not vanish, it withdrew. And Lena stepped forward. Not out, but through. The air beyond the garden was heavier. Not cruel, just thicker. It clung to her skin like forgotten sorrow. Sounds returned, distant bells, rustling traffic, bumps. The low hum of life layered over itself. and with it came sensation 1,000 tiny reminders that the world outside still moved too quickly. Lena stood on a quiet street bordered by trees that had forgotten how to listen. The sky above her was gray, not with magic, but with weather. She inhaled deeply, and her lungs stretched with memory. She walked. Each step felt uncertain, like trying to remember a dance you once knew. The people she passed did not see her. Not truly. Their eyes flitted past, preoccupied by devices and worries and destinations. But some paused, only for a breath, as if sensing something, softer. She found a bench in a small park and sat. The seed still glowed in her hand, but now it pulsed faintly again, not from her, but from others. Lena looked up. A woman was sitting across from her, early 40s, pale, tired eyes. She stared into the middle distance, her coffee untouched. Lena didn't speak, but the woman did. "I don't know why I stopped here," she said. "I just couldn't walk anymore." Lena nodded. The woman sighed, rubbing her temples. "I lost someone a month ago. My brother. Car accident. He always said he didn't know how to say goodbye properly. Guess he never had to." Her voice trembled. "I haven't cried, not once. Not because I don't feel it, I just don't know how." Lena said nothing. Instead, she opened her hand, and though the woman couldn't see the seed, something passed between them. A softness, a stillness, and the woman's shoulders dropped, ever so slightly. She blinked hard. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," she began. Lena shook her head gently. "It's okay to pause." The woman stared at her for a moment, and then, without fanfare, her eyes filled. Just a shimmer. No sobs, no collapse. Just presence. "Thank you," she whispered, and stood. She walked away more slowly, not because she was weak, but because she was feeling again. That night, Lena found shelter in a quiet corner of the city, a community garden, abandoned and overgrown, where ivy clung to rusted tools and the air smelled of rain that never fully dried. She knelt in the dirt, opened her hand, and planted the seed. No ceremony, just a breath. The soil shifted. A single sprout pushed upward, glowing faintly, like a star that had chosen to bloom. Lena placed her palm over it and whispered, "I will stay. Not forever, but long enough. Long enough for this small place to become still. Long enough for strangers to find their way here. Long enough for silence to speak again." In the days that followed, people began to arrive. Not in crowds, but in moments. A child who hadn't spoken since her dog died. An old man who sat with his back to the garden, whispering apologies to ghosts. A teenager with bruises on his silence, a nurse who never cried after her last patient passed. Lena did not heal them. She received them, like air once did. She brought them water. She listened to their memories. She touched nothing, but everything changed. And the garden grew, slowly, tenderly. Not like a miracle, but like a memory restored. One evening, as stars gathered without asking, Lena stood before the new garden, her garden, and felt something stir within her. Not sadness, not pride, something quieter. Readiness. She looked up and saw in the sky above a flicker, a silver shimmer like the edge of air's robe. And in that silence, Lena heard one final whisper. "You remembered. Now they will—" The garden grew without permission. It spread like kindness, slow, unnoticed, and steady. Where once weeds ruled the soil and rust whispered against iron gates, now moss crept with purpose. Vines danced with breeze, and petals bloomed in colors unnamed. But it wasn't beauty that called them. It was quiet. The kind that settles behind your ribs when someone looks at you without asking for anything. That's what drew the children. Not all at once. One came because her feet carried her. She had no home. Only a backpack and a scarf that still smelled like her mother. She did not speak for 3 days. But on the 4th, she planted a stone in the soil and whispered a name. Another came because his school counselor didn't show up. He sat at the gate for hours, chewing the sleeve of his hoodie. When Lena finally approached, he didn't look at her, just muttered, "This place, it doesn't hurt my head." And another was led by an older sister, 13 years old. All sharp words and protective hands who didn't trust Lena, but trusted the quiet. "Just for 1 hour," she said. They stayed all day. Lena never asked why they came. She only made space. She gave them gloves too big and shovels too small. Let them water roots that didn't yet exist. Let them name worms and talk to bees. They painted signs in crooked letters. They strung bits of string between trees. One boy hung a sock in the branches and called it a birdhouse. No one corrected him. No one laughed. They just nodded. "Yes," Lena said, "that makes sense." Every evening, as the sky turned lavender and the last of the crows circled above, Lena sat beneath a crooked elm with her hands in her lap and listened. Sometimes the children spoke. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they cried without knowing why. Sometimes they asked questions that had no answers. Sometimes they told stories that were mostly lies, but beneath those lies lived a soft truth they wanted to be seen. And Lena saw them, not as broken things, but as gardens in waiting. One day, a small girl with tangled hair and a missing front tooth tugged at Lena's sleeve. "Why do the flowers like it here?" she asked. Lena smiled. "Because we don't tell them how to grow." The girl blinked. Oh. She thought about that for a long time. Later that week, she returned with a handful of dirt and a single, slightly crushed daisy. "I think I'm a flower too," she said shyly. Lena took her hand. "You always were." The garden changed with the children. Not larger. Deeper. New plants began to appear, ones Lena hadn't planted. One day, violet blossoms peeked from cracks in the stone path. Another day, the stream at the edge shimmered with golden flecks. Once, a tree bent its trunk just enough to form a seat exactly the size of a curled-up child. And then, the bell appeared. No one knew where it came from. It hung from an old wooden arch that hadn't been there the day before. Small, bronze, weathered, with a string of wool tied loosely to its clapper. One morning, the children gathered around it. "What's it for?" one asked. Lena shrugged. "What do you think?" A boy with dirt-stained knees and a habit of humming answered. "Maybe it rings when someone remembers something important." They all nodded solemnly. And from that day on, each child who came to the garden, no matter how long they stayed, rang the bell once. Not loudly, just enough. Sometimes even Lena rang it. And the sound, soft and hollow, drifted into the wind like a whispered name, finally spoken. One evening, long after the last child had left for the day, Lena sat alone at the garden's heart. She held a thread in her hand. Not from the tree of recall that belonged to air. This was different. It was one the children had made. Knotted yarn, pieces of ribbon, buttons, beads all tied together in a long, meandering strand that they called the memory rope. Each knot represented a feeling they'd left behind. Each bead, a moment they didn't want to forget. Each ribbon, a dream they hoped to keep. They had given it to her without ceremony. Because, they said, "You hold our stories now." And she did. Not as burden, as blessing. That night, beneath a sky blinking with stars that knew her name, Lena planted another seed. Not in soil, but in herself. A new calling. Not just to hold space, but to teach others to do the same. For the world was large, and tired, and full of people who did not know that gardens could bloom in silence. That healing could live in a look. That sometimes, ringing a small bell was enough to begin remembering again. And far away, beyond city lights, beyond memory in a garden, no longer visible to most. Air stood at the edge of her willow grove. She did not smile. She glowed. Because the garden was growing, and the healer had begun to seed the world. It was a Thursday, or perhaps a Sunday. In the garden, such things blurred not from forgetfulness, but from unimportance. Lena was kneeling beside the patch of whisper grass, coaxing it gently with her fingertips. The children had all gone home, their laughter still lingering in the leaves, when she felt the air shift. Not a breeze, not weather, a presence, like weight added to silence. She stood slowly. At the far end of the garden path stood a man. Tall, weathered, shoulders tight, arms crossed. He wore no expression, and yet his presence shouted. The garden responded by stilling. The birds quieted. The breeze ceased. Even the flowers lowered their petals, as if unsure whether they were welcome. Lena stepped forward, careful not to startle the moment. The man didn't move. He stared past her, past the flowers, past the sky. "I don't know why I'm here," he said abruptly. His voice was deep, brittle, like stone chipped by cold. "That's okay," Lena replied. "Most don't." He narrowed his eyes at her. "I didn't ask for help." Lena nodded. "That's okay too." His jaw clenched. "Then what is this?" He gestured around at the garden, the vines, the crooked little bench under the elm tree. "It's a place that listens," she said simply. The man scoffed. "Plants don't listen." "Not with ears," Lena agreed, "but with space." He crossed his arms tighter. "I didn't come here to talk. I didn't come here to change you." He paused. That caught him off guard. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated. "Eric." Lena smiled faintly. "Hello, Eric." He shifted his weight. "This place, it feels like something I forgot. Like being underwater and remembering you know how to swim but refusing to move your arms." Lena said nothing. She walked past him, not away, but deeper into the garden. She didn't ask him to follow. But after a moment, he did. Reluctantly. She led him to a bench beneath a tree, whose leaves whispered in a language of memory. Lena sat. Eric remained standing. "Sit or stand," she said gently. "Both are welcome." After a long pause, he sat. The bench groaned slightly, but not in protest, in recognition. "I'm not here to be fixed," he muttered. Lena looked at him. "You're not broken." He looked away. "I get angry, too much, at little things, at people who mean well, at my reflection." Lena listened. "I yell at my kids, I hate myself for it, then I shut down, then I repeat it." His voice dropped. "My father was worse. I swore I wouldn't be like him." He clenched his fists. "I keep breaking that promise." Lena did not respond right away. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a stone. Smooth, obsidian, warm. She placed it on the bench between them. "This is yours," she said. Eric frowned. "What am I supposed to do with it?" "Hold it." He hesitated. But he picked it up. It pulsed faintly. Not with magic. With memory. His eyes widened. He saw himself age 6, hiding behind a chair as voices shouted in another room. He saw his tiny hands clenching toy soldiers. Saw his tears wiped away with angry palms. He dropped the stone. It didn't shatter. It landed softly in the moss. "I don't want to see that," he whispered. "It already lives in you," Lena said. "Seeing it doesn't make it worse, it makes it hurt." He stared at her. "I'm tired," he said. "Not of the day. Not of walking. Of carrying?" "You can set it down," Lena offered. He shook his head. "If I stop holding it altogether, what happens to everyone else?" Lena leaned forward. "They learn they're allowed to hold you too." Eric's lip trembled. But no tears came. "Not yet. That would take time." Lena didn't rush him. She simply sat. And for the first time in years, Eric did not flee from the silence. He came back the next day. And the next. He never stayed long. But each time, the garden seemed to accept him more. The vines no longer curled away. The wind no longer hesitated. And once, only once, a small child from the group handed him a flower and said, "You look like someone who forgot what soft things feel like." He almost smiled. Almost. Weeks later, Lena found a new seed on the stone bench. It hadn't been planted. Just left. A gift. From someone who had never learned how to say thank you, but had somehow remembered how. The garden had learned to sing again. Not with words, but with the soft murmur of small joys, a laugh shared under a blooming archway, the brush of leaves against cheeks, still wet with tears. The slow stretch of silence between two souls who no longer feared it. Lena moved like a breeze now. Not to be seen, but to be felt in the way the gate never creaked when someone came in heavy-hearted. Or the way the wind always seemed to hush during stories too sacred to speak aloud. But even gentle places receive visitors, not carried by sorrow or rage. Sometimes, they are brought by something quieter, something colder. One morning, just as the dew clung to the petals in reverent stillness, he arrived. No one saw him come. He was simply there, seated on the farthest bench, where the sun took longest to touch. Thin, not from hunger, but from absence. His clothes were gray, not by design, but by forgetfulness. His shoes untied, his face pale, his eyes. His eyes were hollow, like windows in a house long abandoned. Lena approached slowly. He didn't look up. She sat beside him, not close, not far. Just present. Minutes passed. Then more. Birds sang, leaves shifted, somewhere a child laughed. Still, he said nothing. Eventually, Lena spoke, gently. "You're safe here." No response. Not even a breath deepened. She tried again. "I'm Lena." Nothing. A pause. Then, barely a whisper, "I don't remember my name." It wasn't shameful. It was factual. Like someone stating the weather. "That's okay," Lena said. "I don't feel anything," he said after a long while. Still monotone, not sad. "I know I should, but I don't." Lena nodded. He looked down at his hands. "They buried my sister last month. I was at the funeral. I saw people cry. I watched her photo slide across the screen. I stood there. I said words. But inside, nothing." He looked up. For the first time, his eyes met hers. "Do you think I'm broken?" Lena held his gaze with tenderness. "No," she said, "I think you're paused." He blinked. Paused. The word landed gently, like a feather on frozen ground. "I used to feel too much," he said. "Then one day it just stopped." "That's not failure," Lena said softly. "It's protection." He looked away. "But I don't want protection anymore. I want to feel again. I want to ache. If it means I'm alive." Lena reached into her pouch. This time, she did not pull out a stone. She pulled out a tiny mirror. Its surface was fogged, dulled with time. She held it out to him. He stared at it. "What is this?" "A window," she said. He frowned. "Look, not at your face, look into it." With trembling fingers, he took the mirror. And looked. At first, he saw only blur. Then, slowly, flickers. Images. A little girl in a red coat chasing dandelions. A teenager playing piano with fierce concentration. Hands clasped in a hospital waiting room. A face. Her face. Laughing, then coughing, then gone. His shoulders buckled. He gasped, not with grief. With recognition. The cold cracked. A sob didn't come. But a breath did. The first true breath he'd taken in years. "I remember," he whispered. And a tear, just one, slid down his cheek. Lena didn't speak. She placed a single flower in his lap, a white hellebore. The flower of return. He held it like a promise. He did not stay long. But he returned. A little stronger each time. He began to garden not with skill, but with care. He hummed sometimes. He asked about the children. He asked about air. One day, he sat beside Lena and said, "I still don't know my name." "That's okay," she said. "The garden knows who you are." And that night, as stars blinked above the elm, he whispered into the dirt, "I want to grow again." And the soil, in its ancient language, whispered back, "Then stay." The first sign was a feather, but not the kind plucked from bird or sky. This one shimmered not with color, but with remembrance. It was pale as moonlight, warm to the touch, and impossibly light. Lena found it resting on the stone path where no one ever walked, where even the bees turned in silence. When she lifted it, the air changed. A sound, or maybe a silence that sounded like memory, swept through her body like wind through a bell. And then the voice came. Not through her ears, not in her thoughts, but within her marrow. Come find me before I forget the way. That was all. A whisper embedded in bone and time. Lena stood still for a long while. Even the garden seemed to hold its breath. The vines curled tighter. The trees leaned inward. The petals turned toward her as if they, too, had heard. She pressed the feather to her chest and knew. This was not a call from a visitor. This was from a guardian. Someone old. Someone who had once walked alongside air, and now was lost. She did not leave in haste. Lena tended the garden, watered the smallest roots, sat beneath the elm and whispered goodbye to the soil. The children came that day, as if they sensed something shifting. She did not tell them everything, only said, "Sometimes, the healer needs to follow the wound." And they, in their quiet wisdom, understood. One of them handed her a scarf. Another gave her a small jar of honey. The last gave her a pebble with a smile drawn on it in red chalk. "For the lonely places," the child said. Lena smiled and left at dawn. The path was not marked. It never is, for journeys that matter. But the feather guided her glowing faintly when the way was right, dimming when it wasn't. She crossed hills that forgot their names, rivers that whispered stories of forgotten gods, and valleys where no sound dared remain. The world outside the garden was not cruel, just asleep. On the fourth day, she reached the edge of the between. It looked like a clearing, but it felt like memory unraveling. The air shimmered, not with heat, but with dissonance, like a violin played on a string that had forgotten its tune. She stepped forward and fell sideways, not down, not through, but across. She landed on moss, but the moss was made of paper, and each paper held a memory. She saw them flickering as she walked. A temple collapsing under ivy, voices still echoing inside. A girl in blue braids laughing as she healed a sick lamb. A hand reaching for light, but grasping only fog. Each one tore at her, but she pressed on, until she reached a circle of stones, and in the center a figure, wrapped in light and shadow. Neither old nor young, neither whole nor broken. Their eyes were closed, their breathing shallow, and above them, suspended in air, 1,000 feathers, each flickering, burning, wish again. Lena stepped closer. The figure stirred. "Air?" she asked. They opened their eyes. But they were not air. They were her echo. A fragment. A piece of what once was a divine companion. "You came," the figure whispered. "I remembered the garden," Lena said softly. "The garden remembers you," the figure replied. "But I am forgetting. Not all at once, not sharply. Slowly, kindly, as if the world no longer needs me." Lena knelt. "You are needed," she said, "even if not by name, even if not by worship. You are part of the thread." The figure blinked. "But I cannot return. I am scattered." Lena reached into her bag, pulled out the pebble, the one with the red chalk smile. She placed it in the figure's hand. Something in the air shifted. The feathers above stopped flickering and began to settle. One by one, they descended like snow falling inward. The figure wept, not loudly, but with the silence of someone being remembered. They did not leave that place. Not entirely. But the figure, now more whole, more seen, gave Lena a gift. A single silver thread. "When the world forgets," they said, "this will help it remember." And Lena, once again, turned toward home. But this time, she carried more than herbs and kindness. She carried legacy. And in the wind behind her, a soft voice echoed, "The old ones are never gone, just waiting to be invited in again." When Lena crossed the threshold of the garden, something felt different. The gate still creaked its soft welcome. The elm tree still swayed gently in greeting, but the wind whispered a strange note, as if the garden had breathed in and forgotten to exhale. Lena paused. The silver thread pulsed softly in her palm, warm and quiet like the heartbeat of something long hidden. She walked slowly. The flowers she'd tended still bloomed, but now they leaned in unfamiliar directions, not toward the sun, but toward the center. The vines curled tighter than before. The grass grew in spirals, and near the fountain, the stones once still had shifted, forming a silent circle that hadn't been there when she left. At its center sat a woman, hair like river rock, skin like birch bark, eyes hollow but bright, as though something old looked out through something young. Lena approached. The woman smiled, but the smile did not reach her. "I've been waiting," she said. Lena nodded. "You found the garden?" "No," the woman said. "The garden found me." Lena tilted her head. "What do you mean?" The woman lowered her gaze. "I didn't want to be found. I didn't come here to be healed. I came here to stay." Lena said nothing. The garden around them held its breath. "I don't want to go back to the world," the woman continued. "Out there, things die, time passes, people forget. But here it's quiet, soft. I can rest." Lena sat beside her, quietly, respectfully, and after a long pause she asked, "Is it rest or retreat?" The woman flinched. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Lena reached into her pouch and pulled out the silver thread. It shimmered faintly in the dappled light. The woman's eyes locked onto it. "I know that thread," she whispered. "It's from her." "From air," Lena confirmed, "or what remains of her." The woman trembled. "I walked with her. Once," she said. "Long ago. I was a seer then. I helped people see themselves." "And now?" Lena asked. The woman closed her eyes. "Now I only see silence." Lena placed the thread in her hand. "Then begin again," she said softly. "But I'm afraid." "Of what?" The woman looked at her with wide, glistening eyes. "Of remembering." Lena's voice was like warm earth. "You don't have to remember all at once. Just one thread at a time." That evening, the garden shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but leaves rustled in a new rhythm. The vines unfurled slightly, and at the center the stone circle became a loom. Woven through it, the woman began to braid the silver thread into patterns only she could see. As she worked, she whispered names, not of people, but of feelings. "This one is for the sorrow I buried so deep it turned to stone. This one is for the joy I was told I didn't deserve. This one is for the version of me that still waits in the hallway of childhood." And the thread held them all. Not perfectly, but faithfully. Lena watched. She didn't interrupt, didn't advise. She simply stayed. Because sometimes, the greatest healing is not about change, but witnessing someone who has decided to stay the same, for now, and loving them anyway. In time, the loom would hold many threads. Some silver, some gold, some frayed, some new, and through them all ran the memory of air, not as a goddess, not as a myth, but as a whisper in the hands of those who dared to weave themselves whole again. That night, Lena dreamed of water. But it was not a river, not a sea, not a lake. It was a pool, perfectly still, set in the middle of nothing. No trees, no sky, no sound. Just a mirror-like surface stretching in all directions. She stood at its edge. No reflection greeted her. Just the soft hush of unspoken memory. A voice rose not with sound, but with presence. "Do you rest, little flame?" She looked down. A small flame flickered at her feet. Soft, steady to her own. "You carry many," the voice said, "but who carries you?" She could not answer. The flame pulsed. And then a single ripple appeared in the pool. From the ripple bloomed a vision. A memory not of her own life, but of the gardens. She saw it long ago. Before her. Before the children. Before even air. A wild, tangled space. No paths. No gates. Only weeping trees and curling vines and stars caught in thorns. A girl wandered through it then. Not Lena. Not air. Someone older. And she wept. Her tears fell into the earth, and from them, healing herbs sprouted. She sang, and the wind calmed. She dreamed, and the soil turned soft. She never gave the garden a name, but the garden gave her one. "Kind root," it whispered. The vision faded, and the voice returned. "All who give must one day be held." Lena opened her mouth, But the stillness swallowed her words. You tend the wounds of others, the voice continued. But do you tend your own? Her chest ached, not with sadness, but with recognition. I don't know how, she whispered. And the voice, gentle, vast, older than time, said, Then let us hold you. The pool shimmered, and the garden unfolded from within the dream, not as plants, not as earth, but as arms of light. Dozens, hundreds, reaching gently, not to carry, not to change, but simply to cradle. And Lina, who had spent so many years being strong, being kind, being steady, let herself be held. She did not weep. She did not speak. She simply rested. For the first time, fully. When she woke, it was still dark. The silver thread glowed on her nightstand, and from the edge of her window, a single vine had crept inside just enough to rest against her hand. As if to say, We're still here. She smiled, softly, and whispered, So am I. Outside, the garden breathed. Not for others, not for duty, but for itself. Because sometimes, even sacred spaces need to sleep. And the healers who care for them, they, too, must be reminded that they belong. Seasons had passed since Lina returned from the dream. But something had changed quietly, deeply, without need for announcement. She no longer felt like the keeper of the garden. She felt like part of it. Not above the soil, but within it. Not the one who tended, but the one who was also being grown. The children still came. They sat beneath the trees, not asking for healing, but bringing songs, drawings, and laughter. One brought a box of colored stones. Another, a poem written in clumsy chalk letters. A third simply curled up near the fountain and napped. Not because they were tired, but because the garden had become their place of quiet joy. One morning, as the mist still clung to the rosemary, Lina felt a gentle knock at the gate. Not a physical knock, a presence. She opened the door, and there stood a woman with silver-streaked hair, sun-lined cheeks, and eyes that had seen both sorrow and sunrise. I heard you could teach, the woman said softly. Lina smiled. Who told you that? The woman looked at her hands. A tree, she said. Lina opened the gate wider. Well, trees are rarely wrong. And so they sat together for many days. Not with books, not with scrolls, but with silence, stories, seeds. Lina taught her how to listen to soil, how to speak with roots, how to touch wounds without pressing them open. But most of all, she taught her how to stay soft in a world that often prized sharpness. More came. A boy who'd once been angry at everything but didn't know why. A woman who had healed so many others but forgot how to breathe. A man who hadn't spoken in years, not because he couldn't, but because he feared what his voice might break. They came not as patients, but as students, and the garden welcomed them all. Lina built no temple. She wrote no doctrine. But beneath the moonlight, by candle and herb, she passed on the silver thread, not the one air had given her, but threads she had spun herself, from days lived with attention, with gentleness, with sorrow fully felt and released like wind through leaves. Each thread became part of a new loom, built not from stone, but from memory and time and trust. And when one of the students finally said, What if I fail? Lina smiled and replied, Then the garden will catch you. In her final season, Lina walked the path alone again. But this time, not in exile. In celebration, she touched the trees that had grown since her arrival. She knelt beside the herbs whose roots now reached deeper than her memory. She kissed the stones near the fountain, each one now bearing a child's carving. And at the gate she turned. The garden breathed with life. Not dependent, not waiting, but complete. And as she walked into the dawn, the wind carried a voice old, familiar, warm as home. You are no longer just the keeper of the light. You are the light that teaches others to carry it. Some say she became a star. Others, a tree. A few believe she simply walked into the dream and stayed there. But the truth is simpler. Lina became part of the thread. The same thread that appears whenever someone kneels beside pain without fear. Whenever a hand reaches for another not to fix but to hold. Whenever silence is offered not as neglect but as sacred space. In all of these places, Lena lives. And the garden, it grows. Still, quietly, faithfully, within us all.